Hi, awesome human anatomy and physiology students. I'm going to use these slides to very quickly go through some key takeaways from the first two sections of Chapter 1 in our book. Our course is called Human Anatomy and Physiology. If you've ever wondered about the difference between those two terms, anatomy is just referring to the form and structure, right? What are the parts? We can split the human body into all of these different these are the different organ systems. You can break it down even further. Physiology is looking at how those work together, right? How does everything come together to achieve all the amazing things the human body can do? There's some terminology we'll be using throughout the term. We are going to look at a lot of images of bodies in anatomical positions. That's what that is right there. And there's about 3 different ways this could be sliced, which we refer to as planes. They have weird names, but the sagittal plane is slicing the body straight down the middle into the left and right sides. Movement along the sagittal plane, though, is describing forward and back movement. Frontal is cutting right down the sides. It splits the body into the front and back. However, again, remember movement along the frontal plane. So here's the sagittal plane, here's the frontal plane. Movement along the frontal plane is to the left and to the right. And then transverse is slicing right across the middle there, splitting body into upper and lower portions. But I mean, you can make that cut anywhere. And again, it's movement along that plane would be rotational, right? You may remember from biology that humans are coelomates, which means we have a body cavity. I know it's kind of gross to think, but if you were to slice yourself open and take all your organs out, your body wouldn't just crumple in on itself. It would be like an empty suitcase. That's what cavities are. Posterior in the back, we've got all the nervous system stuff. Brain is in the cranial, and then the spinal cord going all the way down. Anterior in the front is where a lot of organs are. I think this is really interesting that you've got a thoracic, and then you've got what's called the abdominopelvic. And these two cavities are separated by a really big muscle right here called the diaphragm, which you may know is the muscle at the base of your lungs, allows you to breathe. It's kind of interesting because here is where, in the thoracic, is where your heart and lungs are. And they're actually under a little bit of pressure, right? Our lungs have to be able to expand and contract constantly. And so that's why they're kept in a sort of separate space from your stomach and intestines that are down here. And in fact, again, it's a little gross to think about, but a common injury in car accidents sometimes is to get a hole poked in the diaphragm. And then as that person breathes, their guts kind of get sucked up into this other column here. And so surgeons have to move the guts back down again. Our face has a variety of different cavities as well, right? Your mouth, your nose, this is where your eyeball is, orbital, and then the middle ear, which is amplifying sound into your brain. Some confusing terminology over here. If you ever hear the word superior, don't think of it as meaning better. It actually just means above or over, higher up than something else. Inferior, again, doesn't mean it's worse. It just means it's below or under. That's good terminology to keep in mind. Means slightly different meaning in physiology. Okay, I'm hoping that this is review, the levels of structure. The textbook starts right at the atom level, right? Atoms make molecules. Molecules build into even more complex molecules like proteins, carbohydrates, nucleic acids, lipids, and that's what makes up cells. Cells are pretty much the smallest thing we can consider living that make up living things. Collection of cells forms tissues, which are a variety of cells working towards some kind of function. The human body has 4 key tissues. Epithelial is what covers everything, right? That's our skin and surrounding a lot of our organs. What provides support and connection is just called connective tissue. Transmits nervous impulses, you can guess, is neural tissue. And movement is muscular tissue. And those 4 types make up all of our organs and most of our body. So we'll touch on these as we go through the different organ systems. So a collection of tissues creates an organ. We often describe organs as having one key function, but in reality, they actually have a couple more different things that they do. And then organs work together in an organ system and have a bunch of related functions. You can see that in this diagram here. For example, you've got a muscle cell, a collection of muscle cells is muscle tissue. If this is cardiac tissue, that would make up the heart, which is part of the circulatory system, which then provides the rest of the blood to the organism. Your textbook has a nice little summary table of the key organ systems. We're not going to be able to cover all of these in this course, but it's good to know about their basic functions and the basic organs that make them up. An important physiological process to keep in mind is homeostasis. This is going to be a constant theme in this course. Our body is always working to maintain a stable internal environment. That means for temperature, blood pressure, blood sugar, there's always a normal level that our body is trying to maintain, and those levels are constantly being thrown out of whack, right? Our temperature fluctuates frequently, our blood sugar fluctuates frequently, and so our body's always working to try to keep these within a normal range. And it's a pretty complex system, but again, there's usually some kind of deviation, which means, again, you get overheated, your blood sugar drops too low. You've got sensory organs that are constantly regulating that and notice the deviation. They send signals to control center, which is usually different things in the brain. The brain is connected to a lot of different glands. Those are usually the effectors that are sending out hormones as some sort of response that then generates that response, and that will counteract that deviation, try to bring us back to normal. The most common form of homeostasis is called negative feedback. And again, think of this as undoing. So whatever the deviation was, we're going to undo that deviation. So for example, if you overheat, right, if body temperature exceeds 37 degrees Celsius, your skin and brain are going to notice that. They're going to send signals to the brain, and then it's going to send signals to get your sweat glands open, so you start sweating. You might try to look for some shade, pour water on yourself. There's different behaviors that also generates, and that will cool you back down. And then once your body's back to its normal, that all stops, right? It's not like you continue to sweat or you continue to try to make yourself even colder. Once you've hit that point, you're done. Numerous examples of negative feedback that you can look at. Look at how your heart rate increases or decreases as you exercise. Look at how blood sugar drops and then you have a hunger response. Those are all examples of negative feedback. There are a few rare examples of positive feedback. Think of this as amplifying, right? If negative feedback is undoing and bringing us back to normal, positive feedback is amplifying, moving way away from the normal state. This is very rare. Classic example is birth. So babies, right, when they're ready to be born, as the baby's head pushes on the cervix, it generates nerve impulses, but this hormone oxytocin is released, which is kind of gets the pushing mechanism started. All those muscles start to push the baby through the birth canal. And again, that just constantly cycles around and around, right, until the baby is born, because we want that signal to get stronger and stronger to get that baby out. That would be positive feedback. Homeostasis out of whack can cause a bunch of different problems. A lot of things associated with aging, because as we get older, our ability to maintain homeostasis gets a little trickier. A very common thing in the United States is type 2 diabetes, where insulin doesn't work anymore. So insulin is really important for maintaining our optimal blood sugar levels. If you eat a really sugary meal and your blood sugar level shoots up, your body releases insulin. It's a type of hormone from the pancreas that then brings your blood sugar levels back down. It does that by basically storing the sugar as fat. Let's say it's been like 6 hours since you've eaten something. Now your blood sugar is really, really low. Your body releases glucagon, which then breaks down that fat and back into sugar to release the sugar back into your bloodstream. People with type 2 diabetes have become desensitized to insulin. They've been eating too much sugar, releasing insulin too often. Receptors don't respond to it anymore. And so their blood sugar levels will rise, but then they can't very effectively bring them back down without having to artificially inject themselves with insulin or a stronger form or an alternative form of insulin. Your book touches on distance running as well. Again, homeostasis out of whack. It is possible. A lot of people are familiar with dehydration, right? If we don't have enough water, a variety of bad things can happen, but it is also possible to overhydrate. A lot of marathon runners actually have died from overhydration, and that's because you're not just trying to maintain your water levels, you also have electrolytes, salts, and that sort of thing that your body needs. So just drinking water isn't going to help you in the long run if you're running a marathon or something like that. And then finally, the book touches on metabolism. I think this is a word that is often misunderstood because I think of it as digestion, breaking down food, but that's not actually the case. It's more on the cellular level. It's all the reactions our cells perform. And so it's not only breakdown, right? There is catabolism, which is the breakdown of molecules, but there's also anabolism. Once we've broken down those molecules, they get reconstructed into larger molecules again. And it's incredibly complicated, as you can see from this diagram here, what happens in our cells. The metabolic rate is just how quickly that occurs, and I think it's fascinating that in any given day, 24-hour period, 60 to 70% of the calories that you're using up is just to keep you alive, just maintaining homeostasis, going about your regular activities. even just eating food, the sheer action of digesting food takes up 10% of the calories, right? We use energy to break down and acquire more energy. And your book makes a good point about how people who go on these starvation diets, which are extremely unhealthy for a variety of reasons, but one reason why they won't be effective is because by not eating, you're then not using that 10% of those calories. And so you might end up actually not, it counteracts any weight loss that might occur with that. Hope that was just a helpful summary. Take some time to read chapter 1.1 and 1.2 and take the quiz on Canvas. Thanks.